Good evening. Thank you all for coming. It's an honor to be here. Thanks to Cheryl for bringing us both up from Los Angeles. It's good to be here.
On our first visit to Bellingham, which is beautiful.
First visit, yeah.
Pure white clouds and fresh air. And
didn't rain. Enjoy it while I can.
Yeah.
So, Frida, it's good to see you again. We shared a plane, so we've already practiced this conversation.
Yes. So we're finished now. We're gonna.
And a ride too. So, but I wanted to take you back to the beginning. So I just because I'm intrigued that what I love about being in this field is just people who come to this field from different disciplines, from artistic disciplines, from professional disciplines, to really enrich the art form. And Frida went to Berkeley in the 60s, which is the name of a documentary. And she studied not film, but history and law. And I'm intrigued about a couple things. Did you go on to law school? And then more specifically, what was it about history and law that kind of has gone on to inform your filmmaking practice?
I think they inform very, very directly in that the stories and subjects that interest me, I find, end up, not that I analyze, I usually say, I want to do that story about Maya Lin. But it turns out her story is contextualized in terms of art, politics, and censorship, and history, because she was asked to do the Vietnam Veterans Memorial, which is recent war history, and so without it's sort of subconscious, I think, and think I like that, and it ends up being inevitably stories that have a political social context. And I guess maybe that's what interests me. And so that, to answer your question, definitely studying, because I do remember, I studied U.S. history and minored in English at Berkeley, and what was I going to do with that, And, when I got a scholarship, because my parents are immigrants, and they expected their children to, do well, and, and so I got a scholarship. My father said, "You're going to be a doctor?" I said, "No." So, I just sort of did what I wanted to do in terms of growing up in America and being an American. And
how did you segue into filmmaking?
Yeah, I tried law school and I hated it. And for me, I love lawyers and I love what they do, particularly in social, especially.
Well,
Kay's husband, where are you? Yeah.
Anita's a lawyer. But
yeah, it just wasn't for me. But in terms of filmmaking, I just woke up one day and said, I want to make documentary films. It was crazy as that. It wasn't very mediated. It just was popped, And I just followed the yellow brick road, so to speak, after that.
So you worked at the Wolper organization down in Los Angeles, which was really one of the predominant production companies in the days when there were just 3 networks. That's it, where you could see documentaries. So
the independent place to work was David Wolper Productions. They were doing on film, early 70s, and the Jacques Cousteau series, National Geographic, which was not a cable thing. It was like 4 network specials.
Yeah.
But it was a great place to learn because. They paid you nothing, and you got to be associate producer without knowing anything. Was that kind of a leap thing?
I mean, so as a woman and as an Asian woman, did they afford you opportunities to direct and shoot and edit?
At that time, let me think. You got to be associate producer. How's that?
And that's as high as you were able to go.
And that's why I went off to law school, actually.
So
I started in the business. I said, I'm not sure, And then I came back after I realized law wasn't for me.
And then you started your own company with your husband?
Yes. Then I met my significant other, my husband. Whoops.
What was that? Oh.
My glasses, fine.
Okay.
I can't see anyway here.
I can see. I'll be your eyes.
And we found out that actually there were grants for documentary films. At that time, in the 70s and 80s, where do you find funding? You didn't have Netflix, Amazon, you didn't have HBO even,
Well, in the 70s, I mean, it took a while, but for it to become
you had PBS. You either had the networks. Where did you show your work? It wasn't in theaters so much. It was mainly on television. And the funding came through PBS and through grants, and you found out that if you had a nonprofit, you could qualify for these grants. So we started a nonprofit called the American Film Foundation. So we did a lot of, and particularly, you know, when you say documentaries, it's synonymous with not profit. So, you know, but it's changed today, and we can talk about the opportunities today later. Okay?
Yeah. There are a lot more opportunities, but we will talk about the opportunities in the 70s and 80s. How was it in making films, and you know, in presenting yourself to potential funders, potential distributors, and broadcasters?
Well, what's interesting is that if you qualified for grants, you didn't have to, you know, schmooze. You just simply wrote. You know, there was no, you know, golfing together or playing mahjong or whatever. You know, basically, you know, you just applied for grants, and it was based on merit. So they never knew what I looked like, you know. And so you asked, how does race and women enter into it?
Yeah.
Frida Mock, they thought, was a German Jew. You see, that's really, they expect me to walk in looking like you look like that. You know? But actually, it was really hilarious because Roger Ebert finally met me because I had a little contretemps with him a little bit.
Yeah.
When he finally met me, he just took a double take. He just thought I was, you know, what I just described. And, you know, he was shocked, actually. He was just shocked that I... So, so in the beginning days, I think it was interesting. The grants came on merit. You wrote something and got rejected, and so you rewrote it and re-edited. Like the Maya Lin film is an example. I got, in the end, qualified for every grant you could get. You know, every political grant, every art grant, every grant. But the initial round, I remember, I wrote it one way, and I had a, you know, you send a little 5-minute promo reel, and you get this snotty rejection letter. I said, sounds like, it's like, who is this doing? Yeah, it was the worst rejection letter you could have, okay? So, okay, I rewrote it and made it a lot more, you know, hot. I played the race card, actually, you know. I said, she's Chinese, you know. Yeah, I mean, you just have to be very kind of slightly pragmatic. And I learned that actually from William Goldman. We did a series on screenwriters.
Yeah.
And he said, there's a selling version and there's a shooting version. And you know that. Any of you have had to, you know, spin a project, you know, do a business. And there's a huge difference between... I remember when he wrote his first screenplay, he says, he pitched it, and then he says, I don't know how to write screenplays. So he ran down, you got to go. And he ran down the bookstore and figured out, oh, that's how you write a screenplay.
Yeah, no, a documentary is never, the final product is never what you first thought of. And I think it's something, Al Maisel said something about that if it is, you've done it all wrong.
Yeah.
Because there are vicissitudes in the process. And,
yeah, I mean, you have to raise money, and how do you raise money? You don't want to be disingenuous, but you sort of tailor, especially grants, because, you know, as you know, there's mission statements in all these nonprofits, and so they're emphasizing women, or they're emphasizing, you know, trees, I don't know what. So you kind of, you know, I'm going to have a, you know, you kind of, you know, skew things a little bit so they can say yes.
Yeah.
What's that?
That's right. Let the tail wag the dog. But I want to talk about a little bit more about your work, and particularly your portraits, which are really indelible, of artists, of activists. Talk about how you choose your subjects. What is, you know, what kind of compels you to move forward and say, I want to make a film about her or him?
Yeah. Okay. So if half the work I do or our company does is self-starting, you know, blank piece of paper, and you have a crazy idea, I don't want to do that. The other half, fortunately, comes to you because they say, you're an architect, build me a house. Or you're a filmmaker, please do this film. So as an example, on the latter, as an example, the Kennedy family came to us. They said, you know, Mom is turning 100. We want to film about Rose Kennedy. So the portrait came. So sometimes you get something, and perhaps maybe it was because they knew about the Maya Lin film or whatever, okay? So if they end up being portrait films, which tends to be, I find, Maya Lin, Tony Kushner, Anita Hill as examples, I just sort of get an inspiration. I get some crazy idea, I'm going to do that. So 5 years later, I said, I'm never going to do that again. That was Maya Lin, really. No, that was Maya Lin. You know, it did well. You know, one thing, you know, blah blah. One thing, you know. But if you ever knew what you were going to do up front, you would never do it. You know that. You wouldn't have children, right? Yeah, I know.
That's
you know,
true.
Yeah. So,
Yeah,
so
but then you do. But with Maya Lin,
Maya Lin is an
and
example.
Annie Lamott, Tony Kushner, three artists. How did you present your vision to them, your objectives, your goals of what you wanted to accomplish, and to convince them that they, seemingly private people, they're artists. I mean, that they could be on camera for a long time. You spent a long time with them, very private moments too.
It's a great question because it turns out it's not very mysterious. Actually, there's very little conversation that goes on in all three examples. I had met Maya maybe once briefly. I hadn't, I had done some films, and I actually just wrote her a letter.
Yeah.
And actually, Tony Kushner, I wrote a letter to.
Annie Lamott.
Annie Lamott. I met her at a conference, and I always write just a brief letter. I'm so and so. It's as simple as that. And of course, after Maya Lin, people knew the work. Like Tony Kushner loved Maya Lin.
Okay.
But it's generally just a simple letter. But before I had the Oscar, I don't know why Maya said yes, but she said yes anyway. And I remember I wrote a letter, and I get this phone call, and she says, "Yeah, what do you want to do?" Oh, God, yeah. And she's, if you saw the film, she as an artist designer makes decisions like that. She says like dropping an egg. And so when she made a decision, okay, let's make the film. She called me, and I said, I don't know what I'm going to, I hadn't done anything. I thought it was a great idea. I'd like to do something about her. And actually, I had read that she was doing her second memorial, the Civil Rights Memorial.
Yeah.
And I thought, this sounds like a great idea to do a film that is anchored by war and race. The Vietnam War and that. I just had that idea, war and race, and how do you express that in a three-dimensional form as opposed to a monograph or, a painting. So I thought it'd be interesting to kind of look at her process. And that's the only thing I said, that I'd like to do a film probably as simple as that, and it'd be over in a year. And it took 5 years. Because when you meet particularly an architect, artist, designer, they're like filmmakers. It takes 2 to 5 years to marinate a project. So what you as filmmakers do often is I find most of my topics, 3 out of 5, come out of the newspaper. I'll read or a magazine. And I had read that she was doing her second. Actually, my cousin sent me the article in the newspaper about her doing her second memorial and her last memorial, which is a Civil Rights Memorial. But actually, it turns out it wasn't her last memorial. She did it later on. So what happens is that you say, that's a great idea. Then you meet them, which is not that superficial, as simple as a newspaper article. And you find they're doing all these projects. So in her case, it was amazing. Under 30, everything you see in that film, she designed before she turned 30. And they all dealt with the big issues of our time: war, race, women, peace, and ecology. So it made for a really kind of a big story, and that's why it took 5 years actually, because a lot of things were not finished, and then we were able to do, especially the Women's Memorial as an example, we were able to film the whole process.
Yeah. And with Tony Kushner, a lot of his works had been produced, so there wasn't that opportunity, and with his process is so internal, but I'm curious. I mean, he's someone who's been interviewed a lot, thanks to Angels in America. What was your process in getting to the person behind the persona?
Okay, Tony, as I was fascinated by him because of his politics.
Yeah.
And I hadn't seen Angels in America when I had asked him if could I do a film on him. It's as simple as that. And I don't know why he said yes if I had never seen his work, right? It was like, why did he say yes? I'm not sure. I guess he was curious,
But he had seen Maya Lin, though, and that was kind of the linchpin.
Yeah, and I guess he felt I had a lot of credibility, and his agent knew me. I had done Annie Lamott. I had done Bird by Bird with Annie. Was that yeah? And there was his agent is in the film. He's married to his husband, which was not legal at that time. It was the first gay marriage I had filmed, and Tony's was the second one, and neither of them were legal, and they're the best marriages I've ever been to, you know. Yeah.
Weddings.
Weddings.
Yeah.
Weddings, yeah. So I think he probably said, you know, you should talk to Frida. Maybe that was, but he was the only one I had to slightly pursue for a while, maybe, you know, a couple phone calls and that. And then he said, sure, why don't you come to New York? And so it was right after 9/11, and he was in rehearsal on Home Buddy Cobble, which was right, you know, a couple of blocks from 9/11, you know, the Twin Towers. So it's a really crazy kind of atmosphere to be doing a film right after 9/11, physically down there. And so in terms of, I was interested actually in his politics. And I came to him from that direction. And actually what interested me was Home Buddy Cobble, because I had been to Afghanistan, you know, right after college. And I said, what's he, you know, if he had done, you know, Guatemala, you know, there would never be a Tony Kushner film, I'm sure, because I've never been in Guatemala. So I was just curious what interested him in Afghanistan. So it came from kind of a personal, started with a personal, kind of a personal thing. Yeah.
And I mean, there are personal moments in the film. I mean, talking about when he came out to his parents and how he incorporates that. I mean,
into Angels in America.
Into Angels in America, yeah.
So once he said yes, I just kept popping up like Zelig. You know, it was sort of like, you know, because I remember his best friend, you know, Oscar Eustis, who's now the head of. He said, "Gosh, he's everywhere." You know, I just pop up in here and there. You know, as long as I knew his schedule. You know, and he, you know, even if you see the film, it's one of my favorites. A lot of people love it because he's so candid. You know, we go to the Fat Doctor with him. You know, he's always has this, you know, accordion relationship to his body. Oops, Tony, I don't mean to say that. You see this? Meaning, you know, I mean, I saw it. You know, he's so thin now, but when he was with Angels of America.
Yeah,
yeah,
it's pretty rotund.
Yeah, you know, he's had, but so he let me go to the Fat Doctor with him. So, you know, so that's a great scene, you know. So, and he was getting married, so I said, "Can I?" He said, "Sure," you know. So I guess I don't know why he said yes because.
Yeah, no. Well, what's interesting, and I mentioned this on the plane that I went to a screening and Tony Kushner participated in the Q&A afterwards, and he said he had never seen the film. And he doesn't intend to see the film. He just couldn't. He wasn't. And I mean, how did? I mean, has he still not seen the film?
I haven't talked to him in the recent past, but I don't think he's seen the film. I don't blame him. It's hard to look at yourself.
And a Fat Doctor too. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he's so handsome and beautiful, and you know. And so before we went to Sundance, he made sure his husband, Mark Harris, you know, saw the film and told him it was cool. Yeah. Yeah. So.
Because I mean, usually, you know, typical and whatever kind of documentary you make, you share it with your participants. And this I never heard. He didn't. Yeah.
He didn't want to. He didn't want. I think he might be happy that it was done. It's a really wonderful archival look at where he was at that time in his life. Yeah. It was right before he started writing for scripts for Spielberg. It was before Munich. Yeah.
So we'll segue to not necessarily an artist, but the subject of tonight's film, Anita. And this came out in 2014, which is 23 years after the Thomas hearings. Talk about the timing of it. Did you feel, you know, this was the first major documentary about Anita Hill? And how, you know, she's a very private person. I mean, this is something that she didn't go to these hearings, participate willingly, but it certainly made her an icon to many, and put sexual harassment in the lexicon. In subsequent years, it was kind of given lip service, if not, you know, up until Me Too. So, I mean, to talk about just your impetus in approaching Anita Hill.
Okay, it's actually a great story because I had no intention. I hadn't even thought of her since the hearings, as most of us have not. Maybe the first year she was around. I met her, in fact, in Los Angeles during that maybe 2000, and that was 2001. Yeah, I mean, right after that. But afterwards, you know, she's not a she doesn't want to be a celebrity, and she went back to what she did, which is teaching. at the university. Yeah, law school, University of Oklahoma. So I had she wasn't on the horizon, except one day I received a call from the founder of, it's like the Arts and Lecture Series in San Francisco. I think it's called, her name is, anyway, it's a woman who had Anita at one of the, it's like a 92nd Street Y program in San Francisco. Yeah, it's Arts and Lecture Series. Yeah, okay. And she had also seen the Tony Kushner film. And she called me, Sidney Goldstein, who unfortunately has passed away, but she said, I'd like you to send the Kushner film to a friend. She didn't tell me who it was. I said, sure. I said, why? I said, why? What's going on? And she said, well, I'm afraid this person will say yes to the wrong filmmaker. I said, oh, what does that mean? Does it mean she thinks, he said, well, I think she should know what a good film looks like. And that was nice, you know. I said, oh, okay. So finally I said, well, yeah, what's the address? And when she said Anita Hill, I said, Anita Hill? You know, I mean, I remember, I said, Anita Hill? You know, so I remember this kind of, my voice raised. And so I packaged, you know, a couple of things besides that, in the, you know, the Maya Lin film. And I wrote a note. I said, if you're thinking about saying yes to a filmmaker, would you consider me? That's all. And she called me.
She
call.
did?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think she called me or she emailed. Either way, we started corresponding. And she said, what do you have in mind? I didn't have anything in mind. You know, no, the same thing as with Maya. And then, and I'll tell you, I think we should talk about my process, briefly. You know.
Yeah.
Like, oh my God. And she called, I said, well, but then I realized the 20th anniversary is coming up. And that was probably 2 years before the 20th anniversary.
Yeah.
And so we probably corresponded for about, emailed and sort of had some ideas. And I said, I think the 20th anniversary would be a time to really do a story, whatever that story would be. I never actually discuss what the film will be. I don't even know what the film's going to be, except I do know once I do my research. I really do spend time trying to get a full understanding of the story and the facts. So I get a lot of what I call left brain research and reading a lot before I start thinking about how the film will be filmed and all that. So, but I don't actually, they don't ask. Actually, once I find all these people you asked me about, the artists, they never asked me what's the film going to be like. Actually, the only person who did was Maya was curious, and she was curious, and she didn't want to have first, last, kind of last, what do you call it?
Refusal or
or
final cut.
Yeah, final cut.
Yeah.
She was curious what I had, so I showed her like a 3-minute piece, and she was happy. That was about it. But they don't ever ask, my experience is I guess they trust me. Trust is basic to doing these kinds of films, because you do enter their
for periods of years.
They don't
5
even know
years.
how long you're going to hang around, basically. I don't know how long, but, they get used to you, and you have to be I find I have to be very appropriate. I feel that as a filmmaker, you're a guest in their home, and you hopefully are, sensitive.
And this, and Anita premiered at Sundance in 2014, and she was there?
Actually, 2013. It was distributed by Samuel Goldwyn in 2014.
2014, okay.
Yeah. And Anita was there. It actually is a good story because she was a wonderful, if you see the film tonight, and if you haven't seen it before, if you've seen it, her significant other, Chuck, is just a wonderful person. And she comes from a very large family. She's the last of 13 children. And so there must have been, 15 family members coming to Sundance, including Chuck. And it was going to be a big moment. She hadn't seen the film, and she didn't ask to see the film. But Chuck, being very protective, properly so, said, maybe you would like to see the film because it could be very, whatever it could be, and maybe you wanted to see it in the privacy because it's, premiere at Sundance is loud and full, and so that's the only time I've shown a film to a principal outside of a premiere. And so I held my breath, I gave them a DVD, and she loved it, they just loved it,
And so she went, and did you take this on the festival circuit subsequent, and did she accompany you?
She
in
came
that?
to many of them, the kind of, she has, she's teaching as a full-time job. And
yeah.
She would we'd pick and choose certain festivals to go to. She went to Hot Dogs, Canadian, and, she went to Cleveland, Sundance, of course, let's see, Napa Valley Film Festival.
Yeah.
Terrific, yeah.
So I mean, this is the kind of film that whose subject matter gains traction. I mean, particularly even if it's 3 years away from the Harvey Weinstein stories in the New York Times and New Yorker, 4 years away from the Kavanaugh hearings. But has it kind of gained traction as thanks to those events?
It's interesting. I mean, it did its full. When you make a film, you hope it goes the distance. You go to festivals, and it gets picked up for theatrical, and then it goes to television or cable, and then it's available on digital downloads, and then it goes around the world. I mean, so it's gone all that distance. So that was and in fact inspired the HBO movie Confirmation, starring Kerry Washington as Anita Hill. So, but they saw the film, the feature documentary, and loved it, and it went. So it's had its really full expression.
Yeah.
But what's really wonderful is #MeToo. I said put the nail to the coffin. I mean, if people still had doubts about her, although the film, as you may see, is up to you to decide. It's not a saying who told the truth, who lied. That's just the story. But there are those people, doubting Thomases, who still, yeah. What can you say? Yeah. But after #MeToo, you look at this film. I'm happy you're seeing it after hashtag and after Kavanaugh. I mean, what are we talking about? Why are we even questioning? And it's been wonderful for Anita. I mean, she's come. People now they're so embraced.
Yeah.
She's
and
now
the chair of
Time's Up. Time's Up. Which is tasked to, under her supervision, to come up with best practices for sexual harassment and in a systemic way, looking at how we really can change. And she's just, deservingly, loved. I mean, even when we were going out back before this happened, I mean, I didn't think about it. I mean, she'd show up and she's like a rock star. People were just, I love you. It was just great. Because it was it's this, no doubt. Yeah.
So back to you, and with all your accolades and your awards and Sundance premieres, I'm sure giving back. I mean, serving as a mentor. Talk about that. About with your company and how how you approach being a mentor. And
it's sort of ad hoc, because I don't, because I have a lot of other projects going, and I've been, if it comes up on a formalized basis like Firelight, run by Stanley Nelson, who's a wonderful filmmaker who happens to be African American and who created a mentorship program for particularly people of color and others. Yeah. So they asked would I mentor. I did that. They match you, but on a more casual basis, I with IDA, I started. I started this workshop called Oscar's Doc. Kind of demystify. It was a 5-hour workshop. I started in Hawaii, partly because I wanted to go to Hawaii, so I pitched them the idea. That was, sort of like, I wanted to be invited back, so I did 2 years, and then I did it with IDA. So that's a kind of a, that's one way of kind of getting, a big group of people to kind of think about certain ideas. It wasn't one-to-one mentoring.
But I think that, say, bringing in women of color onto your crew, like, I mean, Jessica Yu was on, didn't she work on Maya Lin?
Yeah, her first job was working for our company, and I was finishing up Maya Lin. So
and
she did. In fact, we went. The first day of production. That's right. She came as a sound person, and she lost, whatever she lost. No, it was something. I said, "Don't worry about it. Whatever happened." I think
she lost a laugh. Okay,
yeah.
Something like a boom mic.
So
it's hard to lose.
That's right. Yeah, how did you know? Did she say that?
I didn't.
It was a sound issue.
I'm just riffing. But
I think the knob was off.
Yeah, but that's. I mean, she went on to win an Oscar herself.
Yeah, and hopefully she may have picked up something. I don't know. In our company.
But also, I hope so,
Yeah.
and there are others. But also, I want to talk about your daughter, Jessica Sanders, who is a filmmaker as well, who not just documentary, but has made commercials, is venturing into fiction. But was there some? I know she grew up in documentary.
Yeah, but she was around because my husband also is a documentary filmmaker. Although he started off in fiction, but he often wonders how he got back. He ended up in nonfiction, and that's how we met. Okay, in nonfiction environment, and so obviously you don't want your kid to follow you. So I really tried it again. I said, go into land development, go into banking, anything. Stay out of this business, you know. And no, really, I tried. She got a job. I got an internship at the Pacific Stock Exchange with a friend who was the president. And then she said, Mom, I don't think I want to do this. So anyway, she's much better than Mom and Dad. But I see the challenges women have, young women. She has so many wonderful millennial women friends. I mean, they've been reaching this ceiling.
Yeah.
And I said, if you were a guy with a cap on, you know, out of Sundance, because she was a jury. She won a grand jury. She won a special jury prize for a beautiful feature documentary. Guys get picked up on the shorts, you know. I said, I just see often this, but maybe after #MeToo, we hope things are changing. We hear it in our business, you know, that there is a consciousness of hiring, you know.
And what does she notice? What are her observations in venturing in the industry?
You have to work really hard.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I see her and I see her women friends working incredibly hard. They're all you try to, I mean, she did commercials as a way, I mean, she was lucky, you know, I mean, you always look for a revenue stream, you know, if you're doing independent, especially documentaries back then. Now we should talk about what's happening in the business, which is much, much more encouraging.
Yeah.
But I see they're all doing lots of different things. Okay, in her case, you know, you try to do television, you try to do commercials, you try to do fiction. Has a wonderful, agreements with the people who produce Crazy Rich Asians, the SK. Yeah, so parents, you know how it is. You worry. Yeah.
I mean, and you know, despite there are many more opportunities for documentaries to be seen today versus in the 60s when there were 3 networks. The whole what's called OTT, SVOD, and over the top, streaming services. More and more streaming services are popping up. Whether not just the giants like Netflix, Hulu, Amazon, but there are niche streaming services, one called Ovid TV, which is a conglomerate of different niche distributors that felt, either joined together or died enough. But and there's the Criterion Channel, which just launched on Monday. So more opportunities, but sustainability, wherever you are, is still an issue, and it's an issue. I mean, with my organization, and we've worked with the NEA just about in having convenings around the country. So, I think that's really what needs to be. You cobble together different opportunities to affect a documentary career. And I was thinking, as far as sustainability, what are Jessica's observations of us working hard, finding whatever work comes her way?
Yeah. I think there's certain businesses or certain professions that are much more difficult to have, like architecture. As an example. So it's not only filmmaking, but I think if you're in nonfiction, I think there's a lot of places now that need stories, need content, with all these revenue streams. And so you see some really amazing, business deals that are made, but you still have to maybe be, kind of a Top Gun filmmaker, although not necessarily. You just have to make one good film, And as an example, Magic Happens, that you may have heard, the film that was at Sundance this year on AOC, the Congresswoman. I mean, the filmmaker, I didn't know her. Did you know her at all, her work?
She was funded through us, partly, so I do know.
Rachel
Rachel Lears, yeah.
Oh,
And
that
so,
was funded through IDA.
I mean, partly. I mean, she cobbled together. I mean, it's not. It doesn't take one grant; it takes many.
Many
But
grants, yeah.
but you
But
know,
she
we
hit
were
the
proud to see how well that's done.
Yeah, I mean, as an example, that hit the jackpot. You know,
Mm-hmm.
there was a bidding war for it, and Netflix won out and paid them $10 million for a documentary.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's, I mean, I'm saying that's a high end, and that we never saw that, you know, when Maya Lin came out. I mean, you know, it just, that wasn't there. Yeah.
And I wanted to, you know, ask about, so in the trajectory of your career, if you're seeing, you know, that parity in the industry and more opportunities for women and for underrepresented communities, are you seeing progress, or are you seeing that we have a long way to go?
I think there's progress. Absolutely, there's progress.
Because I think particularly in the academy.
The Academy, certainly Sundance. Sundance is, I was thinking about this, how Sundance, not only in terms of documentaries, but in terms of the issue of inclusion,
Yeah.
they've been there way, you know, decades ago.
Yeah.
They had, you know, they always programmed Native American stories. They're particularly, you know, intentional about stories of underrepresentation, LGBT, you know, all that. Yeah.
And I mean, it seems that, you know, as and you've been very instrumental in populating, particularly the documentary branch, and making it more diverse and more representative of America. And I think there's been real palpable results in the documentary branch as far as almost achieving parity. And
Well, I think not. I'm not sure if it's because there was an intention to be inclusive in the beginning, because basically, you know, we were able to do films, nonfiction, because that where the risks were lower.
yeah,
You know, and you know that's so if you scrambled as a woman or a man or whatever, it's just up to you. You know, so, but yeah, so that. But I think the inclusion, the sensitivity to that issue has happened only since Carol Boone Isaac
yeah,
was the president. You know, under her, the idea of that they passed a policy called A2020, which meant in 2020 we want to have hopefully double the number of women and the number of people of color and others in the academy, which hitherto was pretty much 98%, with all due respect, white men.
yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry.
I mean, that's the way it is, you know. And I didn't even think about it, actually, because
No, I mean, it was that LA Times article that indicated that statistic that really, it seemed that prompted the Academy to really take a look
Yeah.
and say, what's going
I
on?
think big data has helped us a lot.
98%.
Yeah, and that has to do with actually seeing how few women were in, you know, they started doing, you know, just data on seeing the percentage of women directing, which is abhorrent. It's
Yeah.
like 3% or 4%. And as an example, actually, in what I've done, I've only primarily worked with male composers, you know, until Anita Hill, which project I felt needed. You don't cast, you know, a composer because he or she has green hair or whatever. They're good composers, you know. But it was a conscious decision to actually hire a woman because
Yeah.
it was a story was very intimate. So. But then this most recent project, which is I'm finishing up on Ruth, Justice Ginsburg. I'd like you to see it. It's, yeah. Then again, I was asked I said, well, should I? You know, I know all these composers, you know, and she said, hire a woman. She says there are only 2% women who, you know, compose for film. And when you see statistics like that, you go, oh, well, we're really talking about opportunity, you know, and the woman the composer I have, I mean, she's so gifted, and she's been there, you know, violining, you know, performing everything, but she didn't have, you know, the opportunity. And now, of course, I'm going to hire her. That was it.
So about Ruth, and obviously that RBG did very well last year, and it's not uncommon for two documentary projects to be happening about the same subject or coming one after the other. So how did you make this project happen despite RBG happening?
Well, this came to me. Basically, you know, as I have to work, thank goodness, you know, I don't have to raise money. People come. And so the two executive producers wanted this film made and asked if I were interested. And so I actually had a strange, funny relationship with Justice Ginsburg in that a mutual friend, I guess, has Shabbat with her, chatting it up and says, "Oh, have you seen the Anita film?" And she hadn't seen the Anita Hill film, so she made it known that she'd like to see it. So I was asked to send another documentary, and so I sent that and a couple other things to her, and I get a letter back from her. I go, "What is she doing, writing me?" It's like it was funny. I said she has more time.
Wow.
Her time is more precious than having to write thank you letters to me, but very sweet, So and then when this project came up, I wrote her, again. And she wrote me back. That's how it came back and forth. And she asked that I think about doing it after 216, when her fiction movie in the basis of sex was going to be finished by her nephew. Okay. Well, 216 came around. There was no fiction movie, and then the election happened. The way it did. So we all said it's time to make this film on Ruth. Okay. And we felt the stories and the ideas needed to come out. So we were probably 6 months behind that project.
RPG, okay.
Yeah. And so we decided mine was on track, was supposed to finish this last year on the 25th anniversary of her year at SCOTUS. And so the decision now, it's finished, and we're going to hold it back until maybe 2020. Yeah. Just so there's distance from all the other.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's what you do strategically. Yeah.
So that's where we are today, and please give a warm applause for
Yeah.
Frida Lee Mock.
But my buddy, thank you.
Thank you for Frida Lee Mock
And
and Tom White.